Hey guys, it's Yuta. So today I'm going to be reacting to Why I Don't Watch Japanese TV by Chris, aka Abroad in Japan. Let's get started.
Salted egg flavour potato chips. This was supposed to be my reward for a job well done today on my 1980s.
Never tried that crisps.
My reward for a job well done today on my 1980s Japanese living room. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well,
Very nice editing. Very nice editing.
Now right about now you might be thinking, wait a minute, did you just say bad things about Japanese television? Japanese TV's amazing and I hate anyone who says otherwise. What about Takeshi's Castle, the game show?
I've never watched that show ever.
One of the greatest myths about Japan to the outside world is that Japanese TV is actually good. Because while people falling over...
Yeah, that's kind of weird. As a Japanese person, I've never thought that way before. When I was little, I didn't watch a lot of TV because my parents didn't want us to see those variety shows. They didn't think it was good for education. So I just watched anime and that was pretty much it when I was little. And when I was a teenager, I also watched some music shows, a little bit of dramas, but not a lot, and some films. And yeah, that was pretty much it. When my classmates talked about TV shows, I didn't know what they were talking about, but it didn't bother me because I thought, I don't know, like I didn't feel like I belonged to Japanese TV culture. I have a brother, so we had our own rooms. My brother bought a TV for his own room, but I didn't. I just wasn't interested in TV in general. I preferred reading, listening to music, playing some instruments, and a bunch of other stuff. So I was okay with not watching TV. When my parents were watching some TV shows, I would often criticize them for being crappy and cheesy and kind of fake.
Now over the years, by virtue of having lived here and done this, I've found myself on both sides of the screen, both as a bemused viewer and as a bemused participant.
Are you YouTuber?
I am. Are you
And I've
YouTuber?
somehow ended up on TV around half a dozen times, including Japan's biggest morning breakfast show, Mezamashi Telebi, thanks to
Yeah,
the
that one's
horrific
quite
behaviour
famous.
of YouTube supervillain Logan Paul, which we'll get onto in a minute. I've always wanted to make a video talking about those somewhat awkward experiences and breaking down the aforementioned myth, but I didn't find the real motivation to do that up until a few weeks ago when a TV show here aired a segment that beautifully personified everything wrong with Japanese TV in about 10 seconds. Shrewd TV pundits
remember
on one of
that.
Japan's biggest channels were discussing why and how the number of cases of COVID-19 was so low in Japan. And a groundbreaking theory was put forward suggesting it's something to do with the Japanese language itself. Was it because the Japanese language is more elegant and softly spoken? A test subject stood before a tissue and said the phrase "Kore wa pen desu," literally "this is a pen," to measure the exhalation of air and any potential virus-riddled spit as she spoke. And I think we can all agree.
So that got shared. That's how I got to know about that. But that was just one part of the TV show. And that TV show in question was the type of TV show, it's basically a daytime show that nobody but people who stay at home and nothing else to do, so they don't have a job. And yeah, they don't have anything else to do. So basically, elderlies and some housewives. These are the main audience. And these TV shows are not known for quality content. We have the impression, we tend to think these TV shows are quite crappy. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they did something like that. It's not a serious news program and I expect a lot of misinformation and over sensationalization.
And I think we can all agree, looking at the results of this objective and meticulous scientific
Totally
experiment,
objective.
the results are abundantly
Scientific.
clear. Was there a lack of cases in Japan due to the wide adoption of face masks or an absence of mass testing? No, it could only be "Kore wa pen desu," this is a pen. I know for a fact because I've done the experiment myself, so I know it's true. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled bollocks.
Yeah, I know he's exaggerating, but I don't think what they were saying was that was the primary reason why we had fewer cases. You know, it was just one of theories.
To be honest, I'm as guilty as anyone else of believing that Japanese TV was on another level before I came here. Like a lot of people, I grew up watching reruns of Takeshi's Castle. A game show in which around 100 willing participants battled their way through increasingly sinister obstacles.
So these game shows get shared a lot on English social media because it's easy to understand them without understanding language. I wouldn't have known any of these TV shows if it wasn't for English speakers sharing these clips. Even though I didn't watch a lot of TV, I know that there have been plenty of shows based on discussions and debates. There was a pretty popular show called Asanama back then, where people would discuss social issues. So we sometimes had politicians and journalists discussing things. It was quite late at night, so I actually didn't watch that show, but they would often refer to the show in books, and I read a lot of books when I was a teenager. We also had this show called Dragon's Den, which Shark Tank was based on. So we had many different types of TV shows, but obviously if they talk about Japanese social issues, it might not get shared on English social media. You have to be familiar with some Japanese issues to be interested in these shows, and they might not be as visually interesting as those crazy game shows. So there's lots of biases when it comes to types of Japanese TV shows that many English speakers are familiar with. But if you want to enjoy more intelligent kinds of TV shows, you need to speak Japanese. And if you want to learn Japanese with me, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak. So click the link in the description and subscribe.
In order to take the castle and beat Takeshi himself. It was ludicrously hard. In 133 episodes, only 8 contestants ever actually took the castle and won the grand prize of £1,000,000 yen. A grand prize that wasn't really so grand when you converted it into dollars and pounds, especially given the questionable scenarios the contestants had put themselves.
Well, you have to think about the fact that it was decades ago, so the value of the money was different back then. Because of inflation, the same amount of money values less today compared to back then.
The winnings probably wouldn't cover the cost of the health insurance claims. Nevertheless, I've given many reasons over the years as to why I moved to Japan. Cultural exchange, learning a language, becoming an English teacher. But it was all a lie. The real reason was just wanted to be on Takeshi's Castle. So you can probably imagine my horror and despair when I started working as an English teacher. My students asked me one day, "Chris Sensei, what's your favourite Japanese TV show?" And I thought, yes, this is my chance to show off, to show that I've actually watched.
What's my favorite Japanese TV show? I can't think of any because I don't watch TV. Not just Japanese TV. I don't watch TV in general. But I do watch a lot of YouTube, so it's kind of similar. But different. YouTube is more active. It's easy to find the type of content that you are interested in.
So I sort of said, well, I like to watch Takeshi's Castle. Yeah, Takeshi's Castle. Yeah. No, I was met with a deafening silence because none of my 16-year-old students had seen it, apart from my 50-year-old colleague who fondly remembered it and gave a nostalgic grin, because it turns out Takeshi's Castle finished broadcasting in 1989, 1 year before I was even born.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had never heard of the show before until some English speakers mentioned it.
The truth is that outlandish, wacky game shows that most people know about are very few and far between, spectacularly rare and difficult to find. People often ask me, "Oh, you must watch that show, Candy or Not Candy, the one where people walk into a room."
Oh, I remember there was this TV show we would watch when I was fairly little. I just forgot the name. I have to Google it. Yeah, there you go. I found it. It's called Magicals no Power. Oh, Nostalgia. Yeah, this is basically a quiz program. Yeah. We would watch this with my family. Now I remember. So I did watch some Japanese TV shows, and they played in a lot of interesting games. But these games were more like verbal games, that you can play with your friends. So it wasn't crazy game show.
Random objects to see if it's candy or not. You must have seen the guy stuff a shoe
I'd
into
never
his
seen
mouth,
this
or the lady
show
munch
either.
on a delicious, tasty table. And of course I have. It's ingenious, it's glorious, and it's also a half-hour segment from a TV show broadcast 6 years ago. It's not an ongoing series, although it definitely should be. It's just a funny thing that happened once in 2014, and it's been repeated so much that people think this is what Japanese TV looks like. Imagine if you were to switch your TV on right now outside of Japan. What would you expect to find?
Food show, maybe, yeah. For some reason, food shows are super popular in Japan, but I've heard that it's partly because it's very cheap to produce these shows.
Tension, suspense, I'm right, you're not. Views, debates, conflict. It's what we crave in the West. We want to be angry.
From a Japanese perspective, it's very interesting because, there's a lot of debate on news outlets like CNN, and they call that, well, there's supposed to be like a debate, but it's more like a shouting match. Who can shout louder, who can shout loud enough so that nobody can hear the other person's voice.
Exceptionally happy.
Yeah, food shows. Very typical. It's always fun to act like Gordon Ramsay, in a restaurant, but, you don't say that to the chef, but among your friends, like, and criticize food, yo, this is under-seasoned. This is disgusting. Yeah, it's always fun to do that. But they do serve a lot of under-seasoned and over-seasoned food, and they do serve dry chicken. Like it's quite common, depending on which country you go.
No other constructive criticism, no other comments, just blind, superficially positive statements repeated over and over and over as if someone was threatening him secretly off screen to act that way. And that is what Japanese TV is like, and for once, I am not exaggerating.
That's gigantic.
Now yesterday I did something unspeakable. I sat down and actually watched some Japanese television, and I did my own meticulous scientific experiment, just like Korewa Pendes, where I went through some programs to see if there were any key traits or attributes that they all had. And I boiled it down to 4 points, and the 4 points are: number 1, every show requires hyperbolic
Interesting.
language, where everything is sugoi, meaning incredible, or oishi, meaning delicious, or in some cases,
すごい
really delicious.
美味しい
Number 2, you need lots of canned sound effects. Every action on screen must be accompanied by some sort of comical cartoon sound effect. Stage 3 is the entire screen needs to be...
So sound effects are very interesting because I think it's very cultural. I also feel like when I watch other countries' YouTube videos, for example, or in Latin America, for example, Latino YouTubers, I also noticed that they use a lot of sound effects. But come to think about it, yeah, Japanese YouTubers also do use many sound effects, but I might not notice them. These sound effects might not stand out to me because I'm Japanese and I'm more familiar with the types of sound effects that Japanese people use. But yeah, if I watch like Latino YouTubers, I do notice the types of sound effects that they use. But I also do think English-speaking YouTubers tend to use less sound effects, maybe? I think that's possible. And actually on my channel, I use like no sound effects at all. I just don't think it's necessary. Oh, canned laughter. I think it's very common with American sitcoms, but yeah, I don't think we use it a lot on Japanese TV. I can only think of one TV show that kind of like imitated an American sitcom that used canned laughter, but otherwise I don't think it's common in Japan. So yeah, I think maybe each culture has its own preferred types of sound effects.
Stage 3 is the entire screen needs to be drenched from top to bottom in text. And finally,
that's very, very true, and that also applies to Japanese YouTubers. Even I, as a Japanese person, I find a lot of these texts a bit excessive.
Finally, of course, is stage 4, the infamous reaction box where an enthusiastic presenter is forced to look on and deliver a relentless positive appraisal of everything happening on.
Okay, reaction box. It's very interesting that he thinks it's something that is characteristic of Japanese TV because Have you guys watched PewDiePie? Have you guys watched any Twitch stream? Reaction boxes are everywhere around the world. It's interesting, some people think it's something Japanese. Just because something happens in Japan, it doesn't mean it's Japanese. Maybe these boxes are not as common, specifically on TV shows in other countries. But since they are very common with live streaming and YouTube videos, I don't think you can say that's something that's Japanese.
And to give you a quick example of all those things combined, let's now do a horrifying simulation of what the Abroad in Japan channel would look like if it were on Japanese television.
こんにちは皆さん、アブロードインジャパンへようこそ。今日はですね、このポテトチップス食べたいと思います。
To be honest, this just looks like any Japanese YouTuber. Yeah, this is, yeah, he's on point.
超美味しそう。でも味はね、ちょっと変な味だけど、なんか塩漬け卵の味。昔でもよし、行くぜ。美味しそうね。
You know what's interesting? I just noticed that he was speaking Japanese. I didn't notice he switched from English to Japanese because it was so seamless. It's very interesting.
結構いい匂いな。じゃあいただきます。
To be honest, I think Japanese people will watch it if he starts making this type of video.
いただきます。
Now you know the kind of performance and sheer excitement required to go on Japanese TV, you can probably realise why I don't enjoy doing it very much, which takes us through to my own awkward experiences. The first time I featured on Japanese TV was during the Brexit vote in 2016, when a local TV station wanted to interview a British person and get an expert opinion on what was happening, basically, and interview twice, once on the day of the vote and once on the day of the results. I was asked to glare at the laptop screen, clasping my mouth in shock, biting my fingers in despair as I nursed a mournful expression.
Yeah, I kind of understand why they want you to kind of overreact. I sometimes film reaction videos in the street with random Japanese people, but like not everybody reacts in a very visual way. They sometimes just stare at the screen and they barely change their facial expressions, and that's not very visually interesting. So yeah, TV people, they always do that. It's like any reality TV. You want to watch people react in an exaggerated way.
Anyway, despite the experience of looking like a murderer on Japanese TV though, 1 year later, when one of the country's biggest TV channels reached out to me and asked me to feature on a show eating the local cuisine of North Japan, I of course said yes and jumped at the chance and the prospect of fame and glory beyond my wildest dreams. Instead, however, it turned out I'd be eating nothing but vegetables. Clearly, they hired the wrong guy for the job, as I was quickly handed an assortment of pickles and told to give a big happy face and reaction as I ate them, which I then inevitably failed to do.
Disgusting. The pickles are too salty. Pickles are dry. What if he reacted that way?
But the worst scene was on a farm where I had to eat some edamame soybeans in front of the kind elderly farmer who'd so painstakingly cultivated them, only for me to turn up and fail to show them the appreciation they so sorely deserved. Now odds are if you've been to a Japanese restaurant, you'll have had edamame soybeans at some point, and they are very nice. They're a great starter or a great side dish. You can't beat.
They're delicious, I like them.
But the variety of edamame that I was trying on screen were actually called dodachimame, which are, well, just edamame with a different name. There's no literal difference. However, for 40 minutes we stood in the field as I had to painstakingly describe the difference between edamame and dodachimame.
What is dadachimame?
No, there was no difference whatsoever. I had to make it up.
Yeah, let me just Google it. Dadacha. I think this is it. So it's a type of edamame. And it's called king of edamame. They're supposed to be quite delicious, maybe more delicious than the average edamame. Yes, I think what happened was dadachimame is a type of edamame that's more fancy and supposed to be more delicious. So what they really wanted to see was if dadachamame is better than the average edamame. But maybe they didn't do a good job explaining that to Chris.
And I could not do it. Over and over, about 15 times, the producers tried to put words in my mouth and try and get me to see the difference that wasn't there.
Or maybe he just couldn't tell the difference. Or maybe there's no difference. But I mean, like if there's different types of edamame, I'm pretty sure there's some differences. Maybe they're very subtle. But to be fair, edamame isn't something that most Japanese people pay a lot of attention to. So I'm pretty sure there's many Japanese people who can't really tell the difference. Unless maybe they compare dadachamame to like a frozen supermarket edamame. Then maybe you can tell the difference.
Some example, imagine you took a crisp, right? You split it in half. I ask you to eat this one, and then I ask you to eat this one, and then compare the difference on camera for 40 minutes in a field on a hot summer's day. And I just
Yeah, okay, that's how it felt like for him. But in reality, it's more like here's $2 coffee beans, here's $20 coffee beans, and to see if the more expensive ones taste better. Yeah, I think that's what's going on here, because they're both coffee beans, but they're different types of coffee beans.
And I just couldn't do it. And throughout the whole ludicrous situation, the nice, kind, elderly woman just stood there bemused, wondering what the hell was going on. In the end, they just gave up and turned the entire 40-minute ordeal into a 10-second sequence.
Yeah, so from the producer's perspective, because they went there to try that special kind of edamame, they would want some type of positive reaction. Otherwise, there's no point showing that. But I don't know, like what would British TV do in this situation? Do you guys think that British TV producers would be okay with Chris just saying, oh, I don't see any difference. It just doesn't taste any special. I don't know if they would be okay with that. I don't know, maybe they would. Let me know what you guys think.
6 months after my disastrous performance reviewing soybeans and pickles, I found myself on Japan's biggest morning show, Mezamashi Terebi,
Oh yeah,
after the
this show is
universally
quite
beloved
famous.
YouTuber Logan Paul came
Definitely
to Japan for a few
remember
days
it.
and left a trail of destruction. But
Definitely
despite the
remember.
serious subject nature, it all had a bit of a wacky vibe to it when the presenter knocked on my front door and insisted on doing this.
おはようございます。
おはようございます。
Are you YouTuber?
I am Chris Broad.
They always do that. They always do that. When they visit somebody, they always like knock on the door and the person comes out and they were like, oh, we are from such and such TV station. Can we interview you? As though they just arrived. But of course it's staged. Because I'd always wondered, like they just happen to visit somebody who just happens to be there, who just happens to be okay to be interviewed. And I'd always thought it's quite amusing. it just makes me laugh.
At this point you might be wondering, why is Japanese TV this way? And ironically, the reason TV's so bad is also the same reason living in Japan is so good. It's no secret that Japan is one of the most polite cultures on earth, where people are very reserved and appreciative for...
Look at how happy she looks. She looks so happy. What's she holding? An onion ring or something? She looks so happy.
food and people around them. What you're seeing on screen is essentially a reflection of everyday life in Japan that's been grossly exaggerated. And as much as I would love for Gordon Ramsay to do a season of Kitchen Nightmares in Japan, it's simply an equation that just doesn't work. If Gordon...
I don't know, maybe it does work. Everybody likes somebody criticizing somebody harshly. Just watching it is fine, as long as you're not the one who's being criticized.
Ramsay walked into a restaurant here and went, oh, it's disgusting, it's like a donkey's been sick. It just wouldn't go down well. It would be incredibly rude, the chef would be mortified.
I don't think so. Kitchen Nightmares, they do that in the States, right? So I don't think American chefs would enjoy that either. I don't think it will be polite to go to a restaurant in the States and start relentlessly criticizing their food. I don't think that will be polite, and I don't think the restaurant would enjoy it.
The viewers would just feel deeply uncomfortable as opposed to feeling entertained. You might be...
I don't agree with that. pretty sure there's plenty of Japanese people who would enjoy confrontations and fights and disagreements. For example, if you watch Japanese YouTube, there's a lot of fights, confrontations, and we have like road rage compilations just like any other country. And even like even with the Japanese TV programs, for example, Dragon's Den, investors would often criticize quite harshly. And also with Asanama, for example, there were a lot of disagreements. So plenty of Japanese people would enjoy that. It's more like the mainstream TV stations these days don't want to do that kind of stuff. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe it's because of the demographic, like people, the types of Japanese people who watch TV. And I don't know, but I don't think it's the case that Japanese people wouldn't enjoy confrontations on TV. They might not want to do that themselves in person in real life, but watching other people fighting should be fine.
At this point, you just don't get it because you're foreign, right? And that might be fair enough. To come from Western television to Japanese television is a jarring transition. However, a recent study showed even 18 to 29-year-olds in Japan are losing interest in TV.
Makes
12%
sense.
don't watch TV at all anymore in favour of streaming platforms and video games. And that is a trend that's been increasing over the years. And while I'll continue to avoid watching it,
That guy in the background, he's Oriza Hirata, who's my favorite playwright. He owns a theater in Tokyo, and his plays are kind of the opposite of Japanese TV. His plays tend to be more quiet, subtle conversations, and very realistic way of speaking Japanese and stuff like that. So I like his plays. I recommend his plays.
except for as a background noise on long, lonely nights in hotel rooms. Even I have to admit, Japan just wouldn't be Japan without it. It is so otherworldly in its presentation, and you've got to see it at least once or twice if you come here. Like, put it on, check it out. It's a cultural experience unto itself.
This is a pen.
So what do you reckon? Am I exaggerating? Is Japanese TV really as bad as I've made it?
Yeah, I think people just have unrealistic expectations of Japanese TV. It's just any other TV in any other country. I don't think, is there any country who has like very high quality TV shows in general? Like, of course you can find good TV shows in any country, maybe. But in general, I kind of think TV shows are crappy. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure you can find good Japanese TV shows, like good documentaries or something if you look for it. But now you can have YouTube and other streaming services. So yeah, we have much fewer reasons to watch TV. But of course, you can find plenty of more intellectual content on Japanese TV or elsewhere in Japanese. But if you want to enjoy these things, you need to understand Japanese. And if you don't speak Japanese, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak, which can be different from the kind of Japanese that textbooks teach you because it can be unnatural and old-fashioned. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta. Alright, see you guys soon. Ciao, ciao!